Another week and another big-time wide receiver linked to the Chargers, and this time it's the notorious Tyreek Hill.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 9 seasons together, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, the Chargers absolutely have to add some kind of offensive weapon, probably multiples. And so that's why every single weapon out there is being linked to the Chargers. And of course, the latest one here is Tyreek Hill. And we're going to tell you exactly how we feel about that. And the Chargers are going to have plenty of money to spend in free agency. How are they going to use it? Are they going to go spend big on one, maybe two free agents? We will definitely find out. And in the draft, are the Chargers going to prioritize tight end or maybe defensive line?
That's a good question because obviously they need both of them. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. David, there's been so much news circulating around the Chargers this offseason, at least as it regards to these top flight wide receivers that have become available or will become available or seem available, because it's been all of those different things, right? The T. Higgins, the best free agent, DK Metcalf rumor to the Chargers, Devontae Adams wants to play on the West Coast, and now we have the newest one from last week, Bill Simmons saying on his podcast, while saying that he saw Tyreek Hill at Super Bowl Radio Row walking around, and somebody that was in Tyreek Hill's camp basically came up to him and said, "Watch out for the Chargers," and walked off. So this is some pretty flimsy reporting, right? And Tyreek Hill said he wanted out of Miami and then, backpedaled and apologized and said he didn't want to be out, but it still feels like he really does want to be out.
Sure.
And that's a situation that seems like it's very much on thin ice. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if they ended up moving him. But David, there's good and bad with a potential Tyreek Hill trade, and we'll talk about the bad parts later. But as far as what he would bring to them on the field, there's a lot of boxes that he checks.
There is. And I mean, you look at what he does on the field, how he affects an offense, more importantly, how he affects the defense. He commands attention, a lot of it. And so what is that going to do? That's going to open things up for a guy like Ladd McConkey, who is already killing man-to-man, and a guy that you really almost can't even go man-to-man straight up, as he proved in the playoff game where he put up almost 200 yards receiving. You get somebody else on the outside that you pretty much have to double. Man, imagine the season that Ladd McConkey could put up after what he just did in his rookie year if he had somebody of that magnitude, a guy like Tyreek Hill, who has 6 of his 9 seasons over 1,000 yards receiving, including 3 straight seasons over 100 catches, excluding 2024, obviously, including 2 back-to-back seasons of over 1,700 receiving yards. Tyreek Hill on the football field is one of the most dynamic weapons in all of professional sports. That is just a fact on how he impacts the game.
He does, and you're right, because he does have a certain gravitational pull to him where you can't play him the way you can play every wide receiver. You can't just leave him one-on-one out on an island on the outside, because you know that if he doesn't have safety help over the top, there's a good chance he could burn you for 60 and a touchdown. And that would be the only time Justin Herbert has had that guy in his entire career.
Yeah.
Easily the fastest player that Justin Herbert will have ever played with, even at his age. The most proven deep threat in the league when you're looking at what he's been able to do over the course of his career. And I think that even if you look at this past season, 81 catches, 959 yards, it's important to remember that Tua missed 6 games this year, which really put a damper on that. And he still put up
a down
almost
year.
1,000 yards even in a down year. But I do think you're right as far as, hey, that does open up things in the middle, and also opens up things for your running game, because you can't just say, hey, we're going to put our safeties in the box. We're going to crowd the line of scrimmage, because the Chargers would actually have someone that could threaten you in the deep part of the field, and a true explosive threat that, yeah, like you said, put up 3,500 plus receiving yards between the 2022 and 2023 season. He was built in an offense made for him, right? That was an offense tailored for him in Miami. I'm not sure you would get more out of him with Greg Roman, but when you like the play action the way that Greg Roman does, it's easy to see that, David, if it was the right price as far as the on the field product goes, how could you not be interested in a vacuum?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just looking at the player on the field and the impact and the obvious way it's going to impact you, yeah, you have to, at least from that perspective, from a straight business perspective, you have to have some level of interest there. And obviously that begs the question, what would it cost? What would it take? Yeah. And I think, Alex Insdorf, who, does contributions to Bolt Beat and obviously was guilty as charged as well, he had a pretty good comp where he said Stephon Diggs, at the same age that Tyreek Hill is now at 30, was traded for a second round pick, a 2025 second round pick last season. So I think that's probably a pretty good starting point to be able to look at. Obviously, I think Tyreek's probably had a higher level of production, but when you consider it, I'm definitely not trading a first round pick for Tyreek. There's just no way in God's green earth that I'm going to be doing that. A second round pick, I think, is probably where it starts. It's probably a second plus is probably where that deal probably gets done.
And as far as what you're going to spend on him, his base salary, $10 million in 2025, up to close to $30 million in 2026, which, for a top wide receiver is about the going rate. So to get him for $40 million over a 2-year span is actually a pretty good deal. It would probably have to come with some sort of extension, as usually these trades do now, but under contract through 2026. But it would definitely come with some risk. So if you're going to be sending a second round pick, you also have to kind of know the volatility of what Tyreek Hill's career has been, with troubles that have really chased him since his collegiate days. And one of the reasons that I hope the Chargers don't do it, as someone that, wants the Chargers to win and hopes to kind of separate the art from the artist and all of those things, yeah, you would love to have Justin Herbert's best deep threat ever. But the Chargers, for the most part right now, have guys that you can root for. And Tyreek Hill, as far as off the field goes, not a guy that would be super fun to root for by any means. And I think it goes along with this question that we got today from Dustin from Red Lion, who says, here's a fun hypothetical question for Fan Mail Friday or Mailbag Monday. Name the one player in the NFL that you absolutely hate the most. Would you accept a trade for that player right now if it meant a guaranteed Super Bowl win this year? So anyone saying, hey, why wouldn't you want Tyreek Hill, right? There's a lot of reasons for it. And if you have kids around while you're listening to this, some of this is a little intense, and it's part of the reason why it would be kind of hard for me to swallow. And that's because he pled guilty to battery and strangulation of his baby's mother back in 2019. He ended up also getting investigated for battery involving his son, who had a broken arm. No charges came from it, but when he was dismissed from Oklahoma State, he did plead guilty to battery and by strangulation. So that enough for me right there is, hey, that's something that's really hard to ever come back for, pay your dues and all of those things. Not somebody I would want to root for. Now, if it was something like, hey, Jerry Tillery wants to come back to the Chargers and you could guarantee a Super Bowl, okay, yeah. Cam Hayward, David, he was a guy you brought up to me because he had the punch on Justin Herbert, a couple of years ago, and that would be, it's like, hey, if Cam Hayward wants to come to the Chargers, I think I could get over that for a Super Bowl. But there is also something about, I don't know if I would want to know the Chargers are going to win the Super Bowl. Like, obviously, I'll take it anyway. You can get it and all of that. I don't want to make a deal with the devil, though, and have to say, okay, hey, I'll take this guy who has this shady past in order for the Chargers to get to the Super Bowl, or win a Super Bowl, I should say.
Yeah, obviously, it's an extremely difficult question, which is why, it's being posed here, because, us all of us Charger fans have never seen our team win a championship. So yeah. I know the allure of that possibility has to be intoxicatingly strong, and I completely get it because it is for me as well. But also, like you said, I want to be able to root for and feel good about the type of players that I'm watching. And for the most part with the Chargers, since I've been a fan, they have definitely been very focused on the character of the players that they have had on their football team. Now, that hasn't netted any championships up to this point and limited playoff success. So maybe they got to change that a little bit, but I don't know if my moral compass is willing to compromised to that level, even if it means enjoying euphoric success.
And the rest of the league's already gone over, right? This is crying over spilt milk as far as that's concerned, because the league has already told you they're not suspending him or doing anything because of what he's had going on, and we just named a couple of the many things. The Chargers have made some concessions with Hassan Haskins, who also has some history, right, that maybe former Chargers in years past wouldn't have gotten brought onto the team, has a relationship with Jim Harbaugh and all that. Either way, I understand saying, hey, do what you got to do to go win a Super Bowl. It's about what you're doing on the field, and I totally understand that. But I'm glad I'm not a Browns fan who's getting Deshaun Watson, right? I'm glad I'm not a Ravens fan going through what they're going through with Justin Tucker right now. There's certain stuff off the field. It's not about being a diva wide receiver or any of that. I get that. Bring on Devontae Adams. Bring on your diva wide receiver.
Yeah, that's different.
This is scumbag of a different level, in my opinion. So for me, I'd rather have guys I could root for more easily, but I definitely understand the allure of someone like Tyreek Hill because of the all-world talent that he possesses. But will the Chargers actually make a splash move? We have to get into all that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell you guys about FanDuel, and when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action, and if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of every game super exciting. There's no game that you can't bet on and make more interesting. It could be a blowout and you could still find things to bet on. But I'm going to stick with what's working, and that is USA hockey in the Four Nations face-off after, the USA won the first round. The USA literally battered Canada in the second round and cashed in both times. I'm going with the USA to win the whole goddamn thing on Thursday, hopefully. Thursday against Canada. They know they're going to be there. Canada still has to win more game, and I'm picking the USA at -145 to take home the whole entire thing. And right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet if it wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and that's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Dave, let's get more into this Mailbag Monday since we had our, stay or go last week, Thursday and Friday. Push to Mailbag Monday today, and we have some really good ones to get into, including a good question that we have here from McKinley Pierce, who says, I could be wrong, but I imagine one of the top-level free agents will be signed by the Chargers and re-signing a bunch of guys and build in the draft. Am I wrong? And Dave, when I see this, I'm taking it as this. Will the Chargers actually make a big move? Is it unrealistic to think they're going to go get someone at the top of the market at their position? And I don't think it is. And I'll say two reasons why. Like, if they wanted to build the trenches because they believe so heavily in it, I would not be surprised at all if they decided to go throw a bag at an interior offensive lineman that they feel like they know they can get elite production from and fill a gigantic hole and not have to worry about that for a while because of how much of a problem it is. The other part of it is, I think it's maybe a little bit overblown how much the Chargers want to be an offensive line team and a trenches team, at least from the standpoint of, I wouldn't be so surprised if the Chargers make a deal for one of these big name receiving options, like whether it's signing a release Devontae Adams or making a trade for a big receiver. I know we had Chris Brim on the show from ESPN. I know we've seen others say, hey, I don't think the Chargers philosophically will make a big move like that. The Ravens didn't do it in Joe Ortiz's time in Baltimore. But man, I just have a feeling like if all these guys are available, all these names floating around getting linked to the Chargers, yes, we've seen it before, but I think that we will see a splash move by this team in the offseason, whether that's throwing a bunch of money at someone or making a trade to bring in an impact player.
I'm with you. And personally, I want to see two of those top flight free agents join the Chargers because there is clear and obvious holes that can be fixed. And for me, I am of the school of thought, especially on the interior of the offensive line, that I've said all offseason, I want the proven commodity. I want the guy that's already been there, done it, and excelled at the highest level. I don't care about a Super Bowl performance because one bad game is not going to compromise the entire body of work for Trey Smith. I'm still 100% on board for signing him because he's already proven that he can do it at a very high level. And I want T. Higgins. I don't care. The Chargers are going to have close to $100 million in cap space after more than likely cutting Joey Bosa and probably cutting Trey Pipkins as well. They're going to have the money. might as well go get the guys that you know are going to come in and make an immediate impact for your football team. That is what I want to see.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see. I could see something like a mix. Maybe you sign one top free agent. Maybe you go trade for one. I know Joe Ortiz loves his compensatory picks, and if you make big deals, it makes it less likely you're going to be getting compensatory picks back. But you have so much money, that money's got to go to someone. I don't know if it'll be 2 deals, but I could definitely see them making a top of the line deal, and we'll get more into the T. Higgins part of it because he is the number 1 free agent available in land, and he fits a big need for the Chargers. But I do want to talk about Athir calling in with a different wide receiver. Maybe he thinks we're maybe a little bit too down on Deebo Samuel.
Daniel, David, my boys, love you. This is Athir. I know you're going to disagree with me what I'm going to say, but I am telling you right now, Deebo Samuel will be the perfect fit for the Chargers on offense, okay? If it doesn't cost a lot. He can do it all. This is what we need on offense, a guy that can do it all, and that will free up lads to become more dominant and more dangerous. We don't need to spend all that money on T. Higgins. We don't want to lose all the draft picks on DK Metcalf. I am telling you, Deebo Samuel will be a perfect fit for us. What are your thoughts? I know you're going to disagree, but I still love you, my boy.
Athir, we love you. And I think it's fair to say that, maybe when we talked about Deebo Samuel, we maybe diminished how good of a player he can be, but that wasn't the intent at all, at least in my point of view. It was more about the faith that I have in the Chargers offensively being creative enough to be able to get more or, get him back to what he was able to do a couple of years ago under Kyle Shanahan. I don't think they're going to use him as a running back like we saw him when he was being super effective as that wide back position. I don't think that he brings a lot of the things outside that you really want to complement someone like a Ladd McConkey. You want someone that can go out there, win one-on-one matchups on the outside. He's not a deep threat type of a receiver. He's a catch and run type of receiver at the end of the day. You have some catch and run guys, right? Ladd McConkey's a catch and run guy. Quentin Johnston's a catch and run guy. They're not Deebo Samuel after the catch, and very, very few people, even at this age, are. But I want someone that in a pinch, on a 3rd and 13, I can throw it to him even if he's not potentially open and he has a good chance of coming down with it. I want someone that if he's one-on-one on the outside and I know, hey, something's coming hot and I just got to chuck this as far as I can down the field up to someone I trust, that person can do that. Those aren't things that Deebo Samuel brings to the table. So he is a jack of all trades and brings a lot of things to an offense, but I think a lot of that was super steroided out because of the offense that he was playing in and one of the best offensive minds in football. And I just don't think we have seen Greg Roman have someone like that he's been able to use with that kind of success in that type of way.
Well, and I'll respectfully disagree with Athir when he says that he can do it all. I don't think that he can do it all. He just can't. He's not that type of receiver where he's an all-world guy, or else, you have suitors lining up, banging on the door of the San Francisco 49ers trying to trade him the first time that he requested a trade. Because remember, this is something that, has kind of been ongoing, whether it's been official or whispers, it's been out there. He's been disgruntled. So I just don't think this is the right fit for what the Chargers need. Like you said, they need somebody who can go up and get it, somebody who can stretch the outside. He is more of a gadget. He's not a gadget guy because he's more than that, but he is an all-purpose type receiver. The Chargers have those type of receivers. I think he is a good player, and I think he could definitely make a team better. I don't think that team is the Chargers.
I just think about the physical dominance that he uses when he has the ball in his hands, and I just wonder how that ages, right? And we saw a down year from him last year. I don't know if you want to be getting in on the ground floor of even someone who might be younger than Devontae Adams. It's going to want probably a longer contract that you have to hope can stay, can be better than he was last year and also stay that good for several more seasons. So I'm not convinced that would happen. But I understand why. Hey, it's like on the surface, Deebo Samuel is an offensive weapon. The Chargers need offensive weapons. I would just be looking for a different fit. Let's get this one here from John Clark, who says, the biggest surprise of the new regime's first offseason last year was when we saw the departure of Keenan Allen. Who's the candidate for the biggest surprise departure in year 2 of Ortiz and Harbaugh, David?
I think if there is going to be a surprise out there, it might be a guy that they feel confident that they can re-sign that may price himself out. So the guy that I am going to go with in that situation is Poona Ford, the defensive lineman. He had a big bounce back resurgent year And, guys that are putting up the production that he put up are getting paid $10 to $20 million per season. Now, I don't necessarily believe that he will get that type of deal, but if he gets to free agency, there is absolutely no telling how many teams would be willing to pay that kind of money for that type of production, because we've seen numerous examples of it. So if you put the gun to my head and made me choose, that would be the guy I think it could possibly be.
Yeah, I think that when you look at who could be the surprise, obviously the reason Keenan Allen was such a surprise is because none of us saw it coming, right? So to think about it, someone that you would just never see coming, it's hard because the Chargers aren't desperate like they were last year, right? So I think a bigger surprise could be like you're saying, maybe not all the guys we think are coming back are coming back. Maybe J.K. Dobbins does find greener pastures and Poona Ford takes off. Maybe Khalil Mack finds a better situation to go chase a ring than the Chargers, because there are some out there, believe it or not. Gus Edwards, we've talked about. Joey Bosa, Trey Pipkins, we've talked about. Not a lot of people are saying Gus Edwards. David, I know you've been on that train for a while now. I don't know how surprising it would be. It definitely wouldn't be on the level of Keenan Allen, but I don't know if we'll see anything like that this year, just because there's not real desperation with this team right now, given the salary cap space and kind of the health that they have there. So it'll be interesting to see. I think that with the Chargers, everything's kind of on the table right now, but I don't think you'll see moves that kind of their hands are forced to do, which is what it feels like with Keenan Allen. But we still have more great stuff to get into on this Mailbag Monday, including if the Chargers should prioritize tight end or defensive line early in the draft, and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. All right, David, we have more Mailbag Monday questions to get into, and thank you to everyone who hit us up at Locked On LAC, or hit my email up, which you can find on my Twitter at Locked On LAC, or call to the voicemail line at 323-524-7924. We always appreciate the everydayers out there for making this show so much better when you let us know, what you guys want to hear about, and you guys always provide for us. We appreciate you, and thank you for making us your first listen. If you need a second listen, make sure to check out the new slate at Locked On NFL, where if you want to keep up with everything going on around the league, you get 2 shows a day now with Tyler the Madman Rowland and my guy Tony Wiggins in the barbershop, as they bring on the guests who cover their team every single day on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast from. Dave, let's get to this next Mailbag Monday question from Joseph, who says, if you were Joe Ortiz, would you prioritize defensive line or tight end in the first 2 rounds of the draft this year? What do you think, David?
Both. I think that's the easy answer, is definitely both. I think for tight end specifically, there just really isn't a lot of attractive options in my opinion. And I'm sure we'll dive more into that as we get closer to free agency. As far as
in free agency.
Yeah, in free agency specifically. I'm sure we'll take a look at all the positions that the Chargers will need as we get closer to that point here. But from what I've looked at, there's just not a lot of options there. I would much rather them go look to try to get a tight end early on in the draft, and we'll see what they do in free agency. Obviously, that's going to kind of dictate what they do, I think, at least in small part, what they do in the draft. But there's no doubt that they need to add talent to both of those position groups, and you would like that to be early. I think the one thing we do know, at least according to most of the experts out there, is what they've been saying is this is a very defensive line heavy, rich draft. So if there's going to be talent that you can find up and down the draft that can come in and make an impact, it may be a position you can push just a little bit depending on the priority of needs that they have. Because, hey, they need an edge rusher more than likely. They probably are going to look to add a running back. They're probably going to be looking to add maybe a safety, a corner. There's a lot of positions that the Chargers need to add to. So free agency is going to dictate what that path is when they get to the draft.
Yeah, and I think the hard thing about these kind of questions like this is the not knowing and not, being able to kind of put into perspective, okay, the needs we see right now by the time the Chargers get to the draft, and have already basically figured out every free agent they're going to bring in for the most part, it's hard to know. But I think you would say, hey, if you don't bring in a tight end in free agency, and the only way that you're going to upgrade that position, a position that really let you down in 2024, outside of Will Dissly, and you could add to that because that's not really his game as a receiving threat, it feels like you have to take one early, right? Because that's where your improvement in that position is going to be. Yeah. That being said, it's also supposed to be a pretty deep tight end class, and there are guys in round 2 and round 3 that can come in and be impact players for you. It doesn't mean you have to take one in round 1, and I think if you're looking at the defensive line, there's many reasons why you would say, hey, load up on that. You might be able to get and a loaded draft where maybe some people are waiting till later to take a defensive lineman, maybe one of the top 3 or 4 falls right into your lap in the first round, and it's a guy that you can't pass up. So it'll depend who gets there. And I think as far as the defensive line part, I think when you look at what happened in the Super Bowl, it feels more attractive, right? And I think that's where Nick is coming from in Santa Maria here. He says, after watching the Super Bowl, it made me think about an email that I had sent you guys about getting Ashton Genty because of how well Saquon Barkley had been able to do. I thought about it and had time to digest the outcome of the Super Bowl, and I retract my statement. The domination set by the D-line was truly remarkable. Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis reminded me of the wrecking crew, Jamal Williams, and Igor Olshansky we had so long ago. The Chargers need to go defensive line in round 1 and 2. Hope for a tie-in and a running back like Cam Scatterbo in the 3rd round. What do you think? So, without getting into specifics, right? I mean, I understand it. This is something we talked about in kind of Super Bowl lessons after the Super Bowl wrapped up, was just in awe of how much that good offensive line, for the most part, for Kansas City had been all year, got completely demolished by what the Eagles were able to build up front. So, David, I don't know if I would go 1st and 2nd round pick, but as far as double dipping and just trying to create, like maybe it is, a big time edge and a defensive tackle in the first 3 rounds. Maybe you go sign a defensive tackle and draft an edge in the first 3 rounds. You have a chance to really remake this defensive front. And as we saw, if you can get younger and more athletic and dominant at that spot, it is one of the Achilles heels, not just for the Chiefs, but many, many teams around the league.
I mean, hey, the strength of your team, I will say it, and I've been saying it for 10 years, is the spine of your football team. We see it time and time and time again. On the defensive line, on the offensive line, you got to have the dogs up front to be able to get where you want to go. It honestly is that simple. So back to back, I don't necessarily think that that's going to happen. But hey, if that's best player available and the Chargers, do things in free agency that allow them to take best player available, and it just so happens to be 2 defensive linemen, then so be it. Then that would be great. I just think that's highly, highly unlikely.
Yeah, I don't think it's likely either. But, for example, look what the Rams did, right? They lost Aaron Donald, and everyone said, okay, well, that's impossible to replace. And they're right about it. No one player can. But what did they do? In the 1st and 2nd round, they took Jared Verse and Braden Fisk. And what did they have? One of the most dominant defensive lines in the entire NFL, which is one of the reasons they were right in it with the Super Bowl champions, Philadelphia Eagles, in that playoff game, right? And I think that when you talk about Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs specifically, and look at the 2 Super Bowls that they lost. Like, obviously, they're making it to all these Super Bowls, and they won 3 of them as well. That's the one kind of common denominator that you had. And when you look at what the Chargers struggled at last year, like the games they really struggled were the games they couldn't get home. Yeah. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers game, they just got dominated by that offensive line and had no chance against it.
Yeah.
We saw it several times, and against the Chiefs in the big moments, they were always able to hold up and be able to get the plays off they wanted to, and they didn't have the athleticism to go chase down Patrick Mahomes, because I thought that was one of the more impressive things of that entire playoff game, Super Bowl game, I should say, was just he couldn't get away from them consistently.
No.
They were athletic enough to chase him down, minimize the damage when he used his legs, and not really let him make a lot of big plays out of the pocket. And when he was outside of the pocket, they were forcing him into bad throws.
So
and a
crucial.
pick 6. So, I mean, I get it. And if they did it, I would understand it. But hopefully in that situation, you've seen major investments in free agency to help out the parts you need offensively. So let's get to this last one here. He says maybe the Chargers should go offense in round 1. Guy Robichaux says, could you see the Chargers taking a running back as high as round 2 in the upcoming draft? Or what is the highest round they pick a running back? And David, for me, it's kind of like what we saw a couple of years ago with Bijan Robinson, right? Where it's like Bijan Robinson wasn't the biggest need for the Chargers that year, and they ended up picking Quentin Johnston, obviously. But he was a guy that was so good at his position that it's like, okay, well, I wasn't thinking, hey, running back in round 1. But if Ashton Genty falls to you at 22, I think you still take him. Like, I mean, I will get deeper into it, and I'll watch more of these guys, and it's supposed to be a super loaded draft class. But I think he falls in that Bijan Robinson category for me right now. We'll see how I feel about it later on. But I'd say after that, though, I think the argument here, David, is, hey, you haven't hit on these day 3 running backs. Like, it's supposed to be a super deep running back class.
Yeah.
So you're going to wait and try to get another 5th round running back or a 4th round running back? Or is this the year that you say, hey, this hasn't worked for us. We need to spend a more premium pick and maybe use a day 2 pick on a running back for this offense?
Yeah, I mean, I think with this administration here with the Chargers, I feel like with Joe Ortiz, Jim Harbaugh, the way they want to play football, the fact that they really want to establish the run, they want to run the ball, they want it to be a big focal point, a big part of their offense. I believe that they would pull the trigger on a guy like an Ashton Genty had, if he is there available at 22. I definitely feel like they would do that. They would at least, very highly consider it, depending on who's on the board there. So yeah, I think that, it's something that I would be open to, depending on how they address other needs. If you get a generational type player and it's available to you and you are convicted that he is going to be that guy, then I feel like they have the confidence to go make that move. So I wouldn't hate it if that were to happen, if you get an Ashton Genty, who is obviously a very, very good, talented player.
Yeah, man. I mean, his production is otherworldly, to say the least, and he seems like he's the full package and excels at almost everything. So that kind of guy is there. You need offensive juice. That's a guy that gives you offensive juice. That guy could bring you kind of, a lighter version of what Saquon meant to that Eagles team. They obviously have the offensive line and all the other parts together that he took them over the top. But you understand when you watch Saquon and how good he is.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why you go spend money on a running back, right? So when you see something like Ashton Genty, the Greg Roman offense. Yeah, I'd love to get big, flashy wide receivers and tight ends, but this is another dude who could take your offense potentially to another level just by the creativity and the just pure talent that this dude has. So I understand it, and I understand those who are saying, hey, it's time to kind of bump up where you're taking that running back. No more just late shots on Larry Roundtrees and Josh Kelly's and Isaiah Spillers, and the list goes on and on. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. Tomorrow, though, we're getting you guys back involved because it's Buy or Sell Tuesday, getting into the biggest Charger storylines and overreactions. And you can hit us up at Locked On LAC to give us your buy or sell, or call into the voicemail line at 323-524-7924 and leave a 30-second Chargers buy or sell there. Or hit us up on all of our social media where we post the show every day on Instagram at Locked On Chargers, our Locked On Chargers Facebook page, or in the YouTube comments as well. And if you guys want to make sure you don't miss the show tomorrow, especially if your buy or sell is on it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. You can also find the show every day on my Twitter at Dan Talk Sports and David's at DroTalkSD. But the offseason is just starting to get cooking, guys, as we get closer to free agency and how this Chargers team tries to become contenders in 2025 and beyond. But we'll be back with you guys tomorrow with Buy or Sell. Until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.